1. Context. I work full-time as a deputy sheriff in a very rural part of the northern U.S., right outside of a Native American reservation. Although I do several things for the sheriff's office, I mainly work inside the sheriff's building itself and the jail. In my time in law enforcement, I have seen many things I can't understand, but here are some of my most memorable. Medium security madness. Inside the jail lies a medium security housing unit. The inmates stay within their cells from 10 p.m. till 5 a.m. During that time, several inmates are allowed out to assist with cleaning and laundry duties. I've always had a weird feeling inside this cell block, but every once in a while my fellow officers and even some inmates see a man we call the Watcher. Late at night, as officers walk the cell block, we will occasionally see a man behind us wearing white inmate worker clothes. Sometimes it's when you turn your head to check behind you, and sometimes it's right in front of you. You never seem to know when you will see him, and a double take results in him being gone. He appears to every officer the same, and to some senior guys it's a rite of passage when a younger officer asks about the long-haired old guy out of his cell at night. This is compounded by the fact that odd cries for help are heard occasionally, only for officers to run out of the office, checking cell to cell for someone in distress, only to find no one awake. I personally have heard my last name called to me while sitting in this housing unit. I've heard it as plain as day right next to me, only for no one to be awake, and all inmates asleep and accounted for. This particular housing unit has a long history of suicides, overdoses, and violent fights for the better majority of the last 3 decades. My first paranormal encounter here started even without my prior knowledge, and other officers only disclosed the information after I inquired. Hell's Kitchen, literally. The kitchen is another hotbed of activity, with 2 spirits appearing in the same manner and performing the same activities to each that see them. The first is a larger man, maybe 6 feet, 250 pounds. Nearly every officer who has seen him describes him in the same context. He can be seen as soon as you unlock the kitchen and look up from your keys. He is dressed in white kitchen worker clothes, standing at the sink washing his hands as if he is about to start his shift. My first encounters happened right after I was off FTO and started night shift. For nearly 2 weeks straight I would see him and do a double take, only to see nothing in his place. For weeks I thought I was crazy, not asking anyone about him. It was only after one day that my supervisor comes running into the office, screaming about seeing something in the kitchen. Only for his horror to be compounded when I gave an exact description of the individual and the task he was performing. My supervisor, who was a devout Mormon and a firm critic of anything supernatural, was scared too badly that he refused to enter the kitchen for a very long period of time. The second spirit of the kitchen is the exact opposite of the man in white. He is faceless, and only a faint orange glow is seen, the same shade as an inmate's jumpsuit. He is seen when you go to lock the kitchen door. The squeak of an inmate's shoe is heard, and an orange glow rushes you, as if he's trying to escape the kitchen before the door is closed. The kitchen also has a history of inmate death, with records from the 90s reporting an inmate breaking in and using the kitchen knives to slit their wrists. Maximum security, the non-stop horror. No place in the entire jail has more horror and terror than the maximum security wing. Activity is non-stop, from random doors slamming to lights turning on and off. A personal favorite of mine is when you're in there. Inmates can be seen at night walking the top tiers on cameras and in person, only for you to rush in and confront an inmate for being out past bunk up, only for every door to be secure. Random screams are heard coming from areas where no inmates are housed. Footsteps happen so regularly that many officers don't even react anymore. But my all-time favorite is the time when an officer witnessed a female inmate through the one-way glass exit her cell in the middle of the night without him unlocking it. The inmate proceeded to wrap a noose around her neck, climb the railing, and jump off the top tier. Several officers witnessed this happen. Radio calls to dispatch were made, emergency tones rang out. only for officers to open the cell block door, make entry, and see nothing. The odd thing about this incident was this cell block housed only male inmates, but several years prior was a dedicated female housing block. Cell 19. One place in the jail has been terrible in particular over the last several months or years. Cell 19 has housed dozens of inmates, but most either have some mental episode that results in them being institutionalized or moved out within a few days. Examples include completely normal inmates going to bed, only for them waking up in the morning screaming, rushing out, and giving evangelical sermons, warding off evil. Normal inmates getting housed only to have a horror show of health issues in the day following, heart attacks, strokes, seizures, for inmates normally of good or moderate health. In the most recent case, an inmate who was a prior co-worker of mine at another job attacked several officers inside the cell, following cries for help. It took 6 officers, a taser, pepper spray, and a restraining order to subdue him. The reason why officers responded: he was choking out his cellmate, completely without cause. Following this, the inmate was placed in an observation area, but was seen taking off his socks and shoving them in his mouth, only for him to be saved from passing out when an officer took them out. The inmate in question, the next day, was seen looking directly in the camera and breaking his hands seemingly without pain. The man is in his 70s. Conclusion: many things can be explained as simply being because of the high-stress environment and nature of a jail. But many things experienced by officers with no prior knowledge of the happenings and the fact that they happen so often is why I felt the need for posting. If you think this story is false, then simply consider it entertainment. 2. I'm someone who, as far as I know, never had a single paranormal encounter. Whenever I tell this story to people, though, they believe otherwise. I was very small, definitely not older than 7 years old. I was playing in my backyard as usual during the day. There's this concrete wall that separates our property from my neighbor's, who happens to be my uncle. The wall was like broken down on one part, and you could easily go through it to my uncle's, but you'd have to walk through almost half a mile of weed and tall grass to get there. I knew there was rats and some trash there too, so I never went there, though I did play near the wall a lot. One day I was doing just that while my mom talked to my grandparents in the kitchen. I couldn't see them, but they could see me and were close enough to hear. Anyway, I was near the kitchen part of the wall when this other little girl appears out of nowhere on the other side. She was super friendly and looked a little older than me. I remember her vividly, wearing oversized bright blue jean overalls and a pretty straw hat. I exactly remember describing her to my mom as farmer clothes. It made sense since this happened in summer. She looked like a Sarah Kay illustration from the clothes, but she was very pale, had freckles, and straight kind of shoulder-length but maybe longerish hair. I have no recollection of what we talked about or what we played, but that's what we did for several minutes. She told me her name was Margarita. She was really fun to be around, but I remember feeling weird about the fact that she wouldn't come to my side of the backyard, yet was very insistent I went to where she was. Of course I wouldn't because of the rats and trash, and that I was certain I wasn't allowed to go there. I remember explaining this to her and her looking disappointed that I should ask my mom first. The next part, I think, I remember very well. She insisted that my mom would be okay with it, that there's nothing bad like rats behind the wall and I shouldn't be afraid. She didn't seem angry about my objections, she just seemed annoyed that I wouldn't just trust her. This made me feel self-conscious enough to say I'd go, but I still should tell my mom first anyway. I don't remember her reaction to that, but I thought she would be happy I said yes in the end. I run back inside and explain the situation to my mom. She's understandably weirded out, since that wall is not connected to the street, and the only other girls who could go there beside me didn't fit the description at all. My cousin was 2 years younger, and not at all like the girl I described. The other neighbors were too far away. Their kids didn't look like that either. I remember she paused and started talking in a way that kid me is sure she thinks I'm playing. But I assured her, slightly offended, that Margarita wasn't imaginary. So we go outside so she can meet her. I run back outside so I get there first, and the whole thing couldn't have taken any longer than a minute. But I don't see her anymore. Of course, I start calling her, thinking she's behind the wall, shy, maybe. My mom then begins talking like one does to a kid's imaginary friend. She's talking at nothing. I'm annoyed as hell again, even while writing this, because I know I didn't make her up. I started looking around for her, but my mom was growing impatient, and she didn't like that I was about to go behind the wall, because I'm not allowed. Which annoyed me even more, because I know that, but now it looked like I didn't. I expected her to come back the next day, but I never saw Margarita again, which is a very weird name for a little girl anyway. So, I can see one reason why my mom thought I made her up. It's more of a grandma name than a kid's, and her Sarah Kay-esque fit may sound kinda unusual, or at least old-fashioned. My mom surely noticed I was expecting to see her again, so she acted like Margarita was there already. I felt I had an imaginary friend forced upon me, and I was still sad and angry I couldn't prove I was saying the truth. But I guess I was just too little and easy to influence, so I, too, kinda made myself believe I had an imaginary friend named Margarita. Just that now she was imaginary, she wasn't the girl I saw because I did, and instead a big butterfly like that one butterfly Pokemon I liked. I knew she was imaginary, unlike the real Margarita, and felt a bit silly playing with her, but it also felt nice and comfortable. So I had Margarita, the Pokemon rip-off butterfly, in my mind for a couple years. But I never forgot about the real one, and the feelings of my mom not believing me again. Every time I told this story, it was around the topic of my mom not believing me, but everyone always acted spooked by it. Over the years, I started to feel a bit spooked too, but maybe I'm still easy to influence. I just know it was real. 3. We were driving with my friend, looking for a quiet place to stop by, enjoy the warm summer evening in Finland. We decided to go to a small concrete pier which is located in the beginning of a long road leading into a forest with an eventual dead end with 2 houses deep in the woods. The forest is known by many to have been host of strange or scary experiences, both paranormal and non-paranormal. We personally have had strange occurrences in the past a bit further down the road. For example, we've seen a rock on the shoreline that had the words "No More War" written with chalk, and nearby there was a wartime bunker or cellar of sorts filled with rocks. There have been other weird experiences as well, but I won't go too much into detail here. For example, meeting an unknown elderly lady at the far end, her wondering why people are around, and after turning back to her, seeing her suddenly leaving in the middle of a thicket, far from the road. Anyways, what we experienced today was different, since we both experienced the same thing, and we are now grown adults. We drove about 100 meters into the forest, turned left, and got to the start of the about 40 to 50 meter road leading down to the pier and parked our car there. We walked along, heard loud music blasting, and at first we thought it was coming from the other side of the lake. We got closer, closer, and closer until eventually we could hear the music almost from next to us. We would describe the music later as ominous rap, something you could imagine a person feeling a bit down listening to. What was eerie was that there was no speaker, certainly no speaker the size of the volume and bass it let out, and definitely no one around, at least not on the pier or the sides of it, which are steep. We felt the urge 2 times to go as near as we can to the source of the sound, but we did not dare. Instead, we decided to just go to the outside of the forest, on a shore, where you could see the pier. We drove to the other place with our windows open, still hearing the music clearly. It's maybe a minute drive away. As soon as we got out of the car, we hear the music no more, almost like it disappeared into the wind. Looking to the pier from another angle now, we saw no speaker, but we saw a black shadow next to the pier, maybe standing. It was getting darker, so it was hard to see what exactly we saw. But we were sure there was no movement, and we didn't see clear outlines of a human. We also saw no one walking on the road leading off from the pier. After this weird experience, we decided to bail out and quickly drove off. Maybe it was all a coincidence and perfect timing, or maybe it was something paranormal, manifesting further the eerie mood of the forest. 4. I worked in the radiology department in a hospital in Cardiff, Wales, UK, for about 3 years as an admin and clerical officer before getting a promotion working in medicine. During these 3 years, I saw a lot of things, ranging from patients dying in the MRI scanners to patients having an X-ray for inserting a meat thermometer in their urethra. Nights always seemed the craziest. One time a patient came in with armed police after an altercation which involved a knife in the middle of the city center, and just so happened the person he had the altercation with was having an X-ray too. This caused a second altercation right in front of me. Chairs were thrown, a trash bin or two, and then wheelchair. So I have seen things, some funny, some stressful, some sad, and many bonkers. But this one night, something scary. I would start a night shift about 7 p.m., then would work until 8:30 in the morning. This was the standard night shift for our department. We would usually do 3 nights in a row before doing 4 days off. After the 3rd night, you were ready to sleep for a week. The strange thing is this was my first night of the 3, so not at all tired. It started off normal. I arrived at the department, took over from the day staff, logged into my PC. During this time, we usually would set up our phones or tablets to watch movies or the latest TV series, as there would be a lot of downtime between patients. Like I said, the first few hours nothing that interesting. Just your average run-of-the-mill night in radiology. Then it came to my break. Now, before I tell you more, I should probably explain the layout of this hospital. This hospital is the largest in Wales. It's a teaching hospital and it's pretty old. Now, the best way to get from A to B in this hospital is through what we call the tunnels or the catacombs. They consist of very dimly lit corridors, old abandoned rooms, tunnels, and other creepy, decrepit areas. The morgue is also found in these corridors, so it's not a nice place to be during the day, let alone the middle of the night, but it's the quickest way to get places, if you are staff. There's always been rumors and mumblings of strange things happening in these tunnels. Some people say they saw ghosts in old-fashioned porter uniforms, taking wheelchairs to pick up patients. Others say they have seen shadows following them from the corner of their eyes, but one person has claimed they were attacked by a person wearing an old nurse's uniform from the 70s. This place is creepy, even at the best of times. But for me, never really fazed me. I've been down there hundreds of times before. The worst experience up to this point was having a sluice pipe drip human waste on my head. That in itself was a horror show. But tonight would be something altogether different, and maybe not even of this physical world. Like I said before, very quiet night. I had been watching the latest series of One Piece because I'm a geek. During my downtime, then a radiographer or radiology technician, for my American friends out there, came to take over and cover me for my break. I decided to go to the 5th floor where the sanctuary, a multi-faith chapel, was located. On a night shift, it was one of the most peaceful places in the hospital. But to get there, I had to walk through the tunnels to reach the nearest elevator. I set off on my journey, which would usually take about 15 minutes, scanned my key card on the main entrance to the tunnels, then proceeded to walk through. 2 minutes in, I started to feel like someone was walking behind me. It being a busy hospital and basically the tunnels acted like a highway, I didn't think anything of it. Suddenly, I heard panting like someone was trying to catch their breath after going for an intense run. So I turned around to check and saw nothing. A bit strange, but thought it was nothing. Maybe just one of the pipes above my head creaking or a generator pumping. So I carried on walking. But I kept feeling like someone or something was watching me and was walking behind me. Out of sheer confusion and fear, I missed my turn towards the elevators and found myself in a large section of the tunnels that I have never seen before. Littered with old stretchers, beds, hospital furniture and equipment. Some of this stuff was over 50 years old, maybe older. Just left to decay in a dark, smelly, decrepit and dusty corridor. This was starting to really creep me out because in all of the confusion I realized I was lost. It almost felt like I had fallen into the back rooms. Everything looked the same. I could feel a tightening in my chest. I could feel the start of a panic attack. I remember clutching my chest and running down the corridor, trying to find a signpost or something to tell me where I was. The sense that something was watching me got stronger. Suddenly I felt something hit my arm in force, almost like someone using a baseball bat. I remember falling to the ground, pulled myself across the floor towards the cold, dusty wall, and looked around frantically, trying to find an explanation to what the heck just hit me. Then something caught my eye. It was almost like a black mist with glowing red eyes. It was about 20 meters away from me, just hovering in the middle of the corridor. Was this the thing that had been stalking me the entire time? I got back up. Sprinted. I ran down what felt like 100 different corridors until I found a housekeeper, a janitor. He asked me what was wrong because I looked pale, but I couldn't get any words out. He then grabbed me by the arms with a firm grip and said, "Did you see it too?" This was the last time I ever stepped foot in the tunnels. To this day I heard rumors of strange things. I'm not sure what I saw that night. Maybe I was tired, maybe I was stressed, maybe it was something. Why else would the janitor ask me if I had seen it too? What else is down there? Well, I can tell you one thing for sure. I won't be going to find out. Thanks for taking your time to listen to this. Josh. 5. I am from Southeast Asia, Indonesia to be exact. In Indonesia, especially in secluded areas or villages, old-time beliefs are very much alive. By old-time beliefs, I mean things like shamans, black magic and possession, etc. These topics are extremely common here. Heck, even the police sometimes rely on ghost possession to solve murder cases. There's a cold case that got reopened involving a girl named Vina who was murdered. Her spirit supposedly latched onto her best friend and told the police everything. Some Indonesians, especially the modern generation, laugh at this because, haha, it's 2024 and the police still believe in that stuff. It's also pretty common here for people to visit witch doctors to get rich, find love, or stay young. In fact, I know more than 5 people who have visited a well-known witch doctor. With these examples, you can get an idea of how many Indonesians feel about paranormal topics. Not everyone, but some. Alright, with that out of the way, here's the actual story. I met a girl named Leela in my freshman year of high school. She's cheerful and nice, extremely sweet to me, and we eventually became best friends. We always sat together, told stories, went out on weekends, typical teenage stuff. Fast forward 3 years and we're in our senior year together. We came up with a plan to have a sleepover at her house. Here's the thing, Leela's house is pretty far from school in a village. It's not a primitive village, they have water, internet, phones, Wi-Fi, etc. But the travel time from the city, where I live and where our school is, to her place takes hours. We have to go through a long road surrounded by trees, but hey, it's our senior year, and this might be the last time we see each other before college, so why not? We agreed that I'd visit her on a Wednesday. I still remember the date, 2017, 06-07. She clearly told me to come before Maghrib. If you don't know, Maghrib prayer is one of the 5 mandatory prayers in Islam, said after sunset. If I'm wrong, forgive me, I'm not Muslim, but coming from one of the biggest Muslim countries, I know the basics. Maghrib time, after sunset, is often associated with ghosts. Many mothers tell their children to come home before Maghrib because it's believed that ghosts roam among the living during that time. At that time, I have no idea why she said that, but being young and dumb, I just nodded. When the day came, I asked my father to take me to Leela's house, and he agreed. We had a problem. We got stuck in traffic for so long, and we weren't even halfway there yet. To cut the story short, we finally reached the village entry, though it still needed a few more minutes to get to the actual village. At the entry, I remember there were 2 separate roads, the right road and the left road with this huge tree. To make it even creepier, it was already dark outside. There were no buildings or village houses nearby yet, and the only light source was from my car lights. The only sound was my car too. This tree I'm talking about, in Indonesia we call it a beringin, but in English it's referred to as a banyan tree. If you want to see how big that tree is, I suggest you Google it. You'll understand what I mean when I say the tree is low-key scary, especially in the dark. In Indonesia, the banyan tree is also associated with ghosts and paranormal activities, mainly because of its huge branches and all. Continuing with the story. We ended up choosing the left road because Leela had told me before that the way to her village is to take the left road, the one with the tree. I swear the ride from that point on felt longer than the traffic earlier, which was odd because Layla said that from that tree, it should only take about 20 minutes to reach the village houses. But it took longer than that. At the time, I didn't think much of it, so I just played with my phone, letting my father drive. A few moments later, he asked me something quite weird. How many banyan trees do we have to pass? At that point, I was confused as my dad. Leela told me there would be only 1 banyan tree, and according to my dad, we had passed the same tree more than 4 times. That's why he asked me for clarification. I told him there's only 1 banyan tree we should be passing. He stayed quiet for several minutes, completely quiet. Then he suddenly told me to start praying. I was extremely confused, but I did as I was told. I come from a religious family, so that explains his reaction. Thank goodness, after I finished praying, it took about 15 minutes for us to finally reach the village. We started seeing the houses and all. To make this quick, I arrived in front of Leela's house and knocked on her door. When she opened it, she was very surprised to see me, but not in a good way. I could understand why. Remember when Leela said to come before Maghrib? Well, it was already past Maghrib. Heck, it was nighttime already. She let me in because there was no way she would tell me to go back. Now, this is where the real horror starts. I remember her house wasn't as big or luxurious as others I've been to. It was small but comforting, and it felt extremely warm inside. She showed me the bedroom and helped me put my stuff away, yada yada yada. Finally, we decided to watch some TV. A little note, she was home alone that night, before I came, of course. After a while, she told me she'd go check the kitchen for some snacks. I nodded and sat there, switching channels on the TV. This is the part that sends chills down my spine. I will never forget that day. She took a very long time in the kitchen. I was wondering what was taking her so long, but after a few minutes she came back, and I noticed something off about her. Her hair was a bit messier and she looked different. Paler? I don't know how to describe her expression. Anyway, she sat down next to me without saying anything and didn't bring any snacks as she promised, so I was like, "Where are the snacks? You promised you'd bring some." She looked at me and smiled while nodding her head in an odd manner before patting her stomach. I was like, "You ate the snacks without me." She just smiled again and looked at the TV without saying anything. At that time, we were watching a quiz show, where the winner gets to take home a lot of money. There was nothing funny happening, but Layla suddenly turned to me and laughed. It was a harmless, soft little laugh. I was wondering why she was laughing because nothing peculiar was happening in the show. She was usually a very serious person. and didn't laugh at movies much. But then she suddenly stopped laughing and looked back at the screen. A few minutes later, she looked at me again and laughed louder this time. I was so confused, so I asked her what was wrong. But she didn't say anything. She kept laughing and looking at me, and then back at the screen, then at me again, and then the TV. She continued doing that for several minutes, so I laughed along with her, thinking she was just being goofy. Then she stood up from the sofa and stood in front of me, blocking my view of the TV. I gently pushed her away with my feet, asking her to move, but then, while still laughing, she did the wheel pose right in front of me, still facing me. I remember feeling weirded out and confused. I wasn't scared at that time because I didn't really believe in ghosts or possession. So I asked her why she was doing that, holding a nervous laugh myself. I really wanted to capture a video of her. But then she walked away to the kitchen, still in that position and still laughing. The kitchen was dark, and from the living room you couldn't see inside. The last thing I heard was her faded laughter before complete silence. I remember waiting there for 5 or 10 minutes before standing up to check on her. Suddenly my phone rang in my pocket, so I picked it up. When I saw the name, I was even more puzzled because it said Leela was calling me. So I yelled out loud, asking her why she was calling me when I was right there and she was in the kitchen. She could have just come and told me. So I picked it up. And the voice on the other end was indeed Leela's. She asked if I would open the gate in front of her house to let her in, since she was on her motorcycle and too lazy to get down. I asked her what she meant by that and how she got out so quickly. She sounded clueless and said she didn't understand what I was talking about, just told me to open the gate since she was already close by, so I did. Still confused, I went out and opened the gate as Leela came in, holding bags of snacks. I told her this story about her crawling to the kitchen and all that, and she told me a completely different story from her point of view. Let's rewind to the part where she went to the kitchen to grab us some snacks. According to my point of view, as you just heard, I was switching channels while waiting for her to get back from the kitchen, right? But according to her, after she went to the kitchen and found no snacks, she decided to buy some from a nearby store. As she walked out of the kitchen, she saw me sitting on the sofa, staring blankly at the TV. When she asked what snacks I wanted, and if I wanted to come along, I just stared at the TV and shook my head in silence. That's why she left alone to get some snacks. But I told her she never asked me that, and I never stared blankly at the TV. The first time I saw her was when she walked out and sat down. In the end, we checked the kitchen, and found nothing, no sign of breaking in, nothing. To this day, we promised not to talk about it again, and we are still friends till now. But, to this day, I'm still asking myself if the real Leela was the one who asked me to open the gate. Then who was the one sitting with me for over an hour? My friends that have been told about this story said that it was something to do with the banyan tree and how maybe there is a ghost. And it followed me all the way because I came after Maghrib. And not listening to Layla's words at all. But I don't know. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 387. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please hit the like button and share the video with friends and family. If you'd like early access, then you can support me on my Patreon page for as little as $1 or more a month. That way you get to support me and the channel, and you get the videos all at once on the Monday. You'll also find links in the description to the Hellfreezer Discord server, as well as the Hellfreezer merchandise store, which is on Teespring. If you really enjoyed today's video, you can leave a tip for that by clicking on the heart with a $sign underneath the video. And while that is never required, I very much do appreciate it. Thank you kindly. Okay, I don't think we have any other bits and bobs today, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... And this one comes... I don't think I've used this one yet. This one comes from Yukon via the Discord, and is, what was the most pointless assignment you were ever given at school? I think I basically chose the entirety of religious education because they didn't Honestly, I couldn't remember anything they taught me in there. They barely touched on other religions, which would have made it more interesting to me. So that's mine. Why don't you let me know what some of your pointless school assignments are in a comment below. And before we go, let's have a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And this was about how much you procrastinate when you have just a very simple, quick task to do. And today's answer comes from Regina Heinemann. As a woman with ADHD, sometimes I procrastinate, and other times I can spend hours shopping and looking at everything. Thank you very much for your answer, Regina. And with that, I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.